Hi, welcome to Nothing Venture, Nothing Game. I'm your host with the most, your GM Jared, and this is a new segment brought up and created by our friend Zach called Healing Pots. Healing Pots is where we choose a specific type of drink. This episode is brought to you by the letter W for whiskey, because all of us are having some form of whiskey. Healing Pots is a freeform episode where we are going to talk about different topics within the tabletop and gaming community. This episode focuses mainly on indie tabletop role-playing games that have inspired us to be better gamers, better role players, or better GMs. In today's episode, I'm joined by, obviously, Zach.
Howdy, sorry for laughing. I wasn't expecting you to start with just hi. That's never happened before.
No. Also, we have Jeff.
That's me. Hey, everybody. Hope y'all doing well.
And, of course, Steve.
Yep.
So, Healing Pots is, like I said, a conversation where we talk about many different topics. But today we are going to focus on the indie tabletop role-playing scene. Now, when I mention indie, it's very strange because for me, I include such classic tabletop games, which many people might or might not know about, such as Vampire the Masquerade or many of the White Wolf systems, Numenera, which is a very newish, came out in the 2010s, form tabletop game where it's kind of like future. Cyberpunk is another indie system I linked to that a lot of people have played. Cyberpunk or Shadowrun. Both of those are those standard kind of futury, cybery kind of in the year 2025, and it's like, oh well, we've gotten there, guys, and I don't have robotic arms. But I classify a lot of those systems as indie, as many people out there haven't really played them. For me, when I'm talking about tabletop role-playing games, I kind of bring up the big, in my head, these are like the big two, which is Paizo, which is a very strong company, and of course, the monster, the Godzilla, the king of all monsters, Wizards of the Coast, or, bringing Dungeons and Dragons. They've never really stepped out of that shadow. They've never done cyberpunk and stuff. They've always just done like, oh, you want space? Well, we got Spelljammer. You want dark and gritty? We have Dark Sun. They never moved it into a new realm or a new system. But yeah, so that's kind of what you're going to be getting here. A lot of conversations where you might know these games. You might be like, oh, I played Vampire the Masquerade with all my friends, and I don't consider that indie. Well, if you go to conventions, you're probably going to find it harder to find people to play Vampire than it is to find people to play 5th edition. But indie is interesting. How does everyone feel about that statement? Am I right? Am I wrong?
I'll go first. Honestly, I think you're pretty spot on with that. I always thought indie was just deviating from the norm. Like you said, the big two, Pathfinder and D&D, basically you can't get any bigger than those, and that's just here in America. But those are also known globally too. People internationally have been playing these two systems since their inceptions. So because of that, they have a lot of traction. Personally, my experience with indie games has always been from the jump, So anytime you're deviating from the norm, that's when you're going to pique my interest,
Yeah, as for me, as far as sort of like indie games, again, you obviously have your big two players in the game, and then you have, numerous other ones that are really good content, really good gameplay. Again, like that's sort of how I feel that indie really is. It's just not the two big giants. And there's lots of great content out there. Obviously, creators can draw upon things from the big two and sort of like have that as a not even like a template, but just sort of like an overwatch of what they're creating. in kind of a way like they could pull ideas or sort of like how systems work, and all of those things. But I mean, even as a group, we've played a lot of games, and even in sort of like my younger days, we played a lot of games. Like we played the first edition Cyberpunk, super fun. We played first edition Vampire the Masquerade, not as long as I would have liked to, but we had a good time playing that as well. There was even a game, I think it came out in like either the late 60s or very early 70s called Top Secret. That was another sort of RPG, like espionage and spies and,
Sounds like a board
criminals and stuff. It was really cool. Like I used to actually have, it was like a little booklet with like, that construction paper green cover, that lime green color that they would have on it. So yeah, like, I mean, and that's another thing. You see games presented in interesting ways as well, rather than just, here's a boatload of books, buy them. It's like here. It's like we have PDFs and we have this and we have that and we have like gear that comes specifically for the game and stuff like that. So when they get more into the indie scene, like you see a lot more of the creativity of the people that are out there who say, hey, you know what? I want to make something that people are going to play and enjoy.
I'm actually going to take the different road here. I'm going to be disagreeing with a lot of people here. Throw your shade at Jared's channel. But I kind of view indie, like we were talking about Vampire the Masquerade. I don't view Vampire the Masquerade as an indie title. I actually look at the size of the company, and White Wolf, who makes Vampire the Masquerade, among other, like they have a slew of different role-playing games, all the different like monsters, like werewolves and vampires, magic users and mages, changeling, so I don't necessarily view them, they're different than the two kind of exemplars, right? We're going to say D&D with Wizards of the Coast and Pathfinder 1 and 2, we're going to Starfinder as, for Paizo, but there are other games. And also the question is how do you view that? I mean, yes, most people know who D&D is, but there are things that are well known in certain parts of the world that are not well known to us. And then there's things that was well known to us that they don't even know exist. So it's as much cultural, but also it's like when most people think indie, they're thinking of like small upstart companies that are like, okay, well, I have an idea and no one's doing this. So I want to do this. This is a space that I can exist in. You can even say that Fate, when it came out, was indie. But now Fate is like wildly popular. It's got so many source books. Could you even really consider it indie anymore? So that's the idea of like, you have to remember when D&D came out, I bet you that everyone thought that was a weird indie niche product that no one's ever going to play. And then now look at us now. So, I think is the size of the company also is, and also how much they buck a trend.
I can actually agree with that. I feel like, because I actually have this weird affinity for the Powered by the Apocalypse system, which now is the driving force for a lot of indie games because it's very simple. It makes a game a lot easier when it doesn't have too many moving parts. But at the same time, just 2 dice is so much easier to get a hold of a lot of the times than trying to get a whole 7-piece dice set. That's not that's hard now with Amazon, but it's still like walking into a store, you can find it, or you can grab it out of a box of an old board game that you used to have.
Right. Well, again, it's sort of like creation of games in general, like even like sport and games. Like when all of these things were created, you worked with what you had. Like, oh, I have 2 6-sided dice because I used to play Monopoly all the time. So here we go. I have 2 6-sided dice. What can I do and create along a system that will just require me to use these 2 6-sided dice? And, again, like it's sport, they took an animal bladder and filled it with air, and now you have a soccer ball or a football or, anything, sort of like the old, like even back to like ancient times, like even like the Incas or the Aztecs had sort of a arena game where you had to get a ball and throw it through hoops. Even though they were sort of on their side, it was, it was kind of like rollerball meets basketball, but I guess not really as cool as rollerball. But again, sort of like upon the creation of sport and game throughout sort of history, you work with what you have.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to bring up something that I recorded a video on. We haven't released it yet, and I still have to edit it. But like I have this game right? This game just came out. This is the Transformers role-playing game in my fancy deluxe edition. It's made by Renegade Game Studios. That's not a small company. They make tons of board games. And and funny enough is when they came out with this game, they came out with like 4 games, as well as G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Power Rangers. Those are not small licenses to be messing around with.
Nope.
And even though that their system that they designed, the Essence 20 system, it's brand new, but can you really call it indie? So the people's idea of indie is going to change from place to place and each person's experiences. But I don't know. I think it's a little bit of a combination of all what we've been talking about.
So touching on everyone has good points, and I appreciate that. I'm going to boo Steve, for his point. But on top of that, going back to like the creation of gaming and stuff like that, right? Like, so going, talking about like how games came about. Dungeons and Dragons, right, was just chainmail, which was a miniatures combat game. And originally, because there was no D20, ironically, there was D20s created, but they weren't on sale like currently. So we have evidence of D20s being used in ancient Greece. They've unearthed actual D20s, like ancient D20s. But so I guess Alpha Dungeons and Dragons, like back when it was considered chainmail, used to tell you to roll 2 D10s and basically have one marked with the higher ones. So you would roll a D10 with 1 to 10, right? And then the other one would be 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. That's how you got that's how you would get the 20 system. They told you to like mark it so it would look different. As I understand it, that's like that was their
right. Just to sort of touch on that, I remember in old editions of Dungeons and Dragons, when you had random encounters, you rolled 2 D10s, not 1 D20.
Yeah. So it was a
like
different.
There was no 1 on the chart. It was 2. Because
to 20.
Wanted certain numbers to have a little bit more of a prevalence. It's almost like when you roll 2 6-sided dice. 7 is a very common number, whereas 11 is not.
Yeah.
So that's how you sort of made your charts. Is you put your super rare stuff at the top and the bottom, and then as you made your way toward the middle, it would be more common, like herd animal. Sometimes you would encounter cows.
Filthy cows. Don't kill them. That's how you get to the cow level in Diablo 2.
Well,
so you gotta watch out for that.
So that's sort of a touch up on the 2D10 system. So go ahead, Jared. Continue. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Well, that's we have age before beauty, and that's what that is.
Well, first full day.
But I think for me, indie really represents games that are uncommon, and when you bring them up, you're kind of first time introducing them. Right. So I would never, and ironically, I kind of went about in my youth, I went about getting into the tabletop role-playing scene very weirdly, because Vampire had become popular when I was in high school. It blew up, right? Like it was the 90th game you could play because everyone was wearing like tight. It was grunge. It was the most 90s 2000th game ever. Like if you wanted to play Dracula but be Neo, you could.
I want to play this now. I have never played Vampire the Masquerade. I want to play it, man.
Yeah. So for me, it was a weird way, and it was my gateway. So instead of going D&D into other things, I went Vampire, then followed the rabbit hole to D&D. And that was my back. And then when I finally got to D&D, it was 4th edition and no one was playing. And that's how I got into Pathfinder, was because no one was playing 4th. And everyone was like, just play Pathfinder. It's just the best system on the market. And I was like, sure, this is, again, all of this was indie to me in my head. But now, as a creator and part of the scene, right? We're all hip people. We're part of the scene. We like, I consider interesting games, and I try to kind of showcase those as much as I can, because I'm always, I feel like I can thoroughly say this. I'm always sending the group like links to games that I've gotten that would never gotten to. Like I was like, hey, check out this really cool system. I want to try it. Sent it to you, everyone. Everyone's like, okay, cool, Jared. I'll check out this link. I never got to it. Like very recently, a comic series got turned into a tabletop game. It's called Die, DIE, as per not die like you're dead, but die like the dice die, like a singular dice.
Fuck, I love that comic so much.
Yeah, it's a great comic.
So good.
They turned it into an indie system, and I sent it to your group, and I really want to get to it. But that's a good segue into kind of like talking about indie games that like have inspired us. No, Steve, no Transformers.
I mean, we could. I mean, like
we'll see. We might have a
is,
break. We might have a break during the holiday. And I'll get some people and
Yeah,
force
we
them
might
to play.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
I'll break someone's arm and we'll play.
We'll do that. We could try Lancer, the Gundam Wing RPG.
I have that one actually.
You have Lancer?
I have Lancer.
You also have Goblin Slayer. You have a bunch of cool ones. You have the Dark Crystal RPG.
I have Dark Crystal. I have Lancer.
Oh, no.
I have, oh my God, I have Phoenix, which is a tarot card game slash.
That sounds fun.
So the way Phoenix works, and again, this is a super indie game. I had to go on Amazon. It was $80 because it's no longer in print.
Ooh.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But it was worth getting, right? Because I'm also a collector. I'm part collector, part player, part gamer. The way the system works is you create your character around tarot cards that you draw, and then as you play, the reason why you're called Phoenix is you never play one character. There's an overarching story, but it doesn't happen in one. Like, I will never play Jeff, right? Continuously. I will die, and then I get reborn as a Phoenix character into Zach. And then as I play, I kind of like have this like very Buddhist, like I remember my past lives, and then it comes with the tower cards as we play. So as you build your,
that's both Avatar: The Last Airbender and All for One in My Hero Academia.
Yeah,
like that's so
and
cool.
And that's how you build your tarot deck, is by having these past lives. So dying isn't terrible, but it's also essential, which I think is interesting. There was a LARP that was kind of like that. I never got to play it, but that was like that concept. It was like you should die in the LARP, and then your next characters will get better. But yeah, so indie games, and talking about indie games, one of the games that I really liked is Viking Death Squad, an index card RPG, which we actually got to play. The reason why I like some of these indie games is they make, for me, something I like that comes from indie games that I've started noticing more and more are monsters are no longer just bags of hit points, and obviously different time periods change different things, right? So I grew up in the era where monsters were just bags of hit points to stop your players from getting forward. So you come to the orc, you have to drain his life points, and then now you could go to the next room, and then you could go to the next room, and then you could go to the next room, and then here's the big bad, kill the big bad, bag of hit points, and then go to the next room, right? I dislike that. I dislike that about monsters because it's very singular in their appearance. And I find indie games are now working specifically with monsters and making monsters much more fluid and dynamic. So with Viking Death Squad, what they did was the creator created a chart, and you would roll on the chart every turn to have the monsters do something. And it said, hey, if this many monsters died or this many things happen, the monsters should act like this. This is how they should change. And I thought that was really interesting, and that kind of inspired me more in the way I play my role-playing games, was with monsters. Like, the 62 goblins, they're ballsy, right? Because they outnumber everyone. Oh, the wizard cast fireball, took 5 goblins out, but the goblins are all now terrified of the party, and they're more likely to parlay because, yeah, it maybe killed 10 goblins. Sure, they still got 55 goblins, but they just realized someone over there that they're against can now just, with a blink of an eye, nuke the party, nuke their enemies. And I see many indie RPGs, kind of like fantasy tabletop games, moving in that direction. Monsters being more fluid, or monsters having a not just ecology, but also a kind of more like moral compass, in a weird sense. Like, hey, if we outnumber the players, we're ballsy. But if we're under the players, we're cowards. Or orcs are like Klingons. They have a sense of like honor system. So they're more likely to fight one-on-one. Just kind of throwing out things I've seen. So what about the group? Has that changed? What indie stuff are you seeing that's kind of like, hey, I would like to see this more mainstream stuff like that? Obviously Vampire the Masquerade, we talked a lot about like that. There aren't really monsters in that. I mean, you are the monster.
Well, there are monsters in that too.
Yeah, I mean, you are the monsters, right?
But there are other things that are more powerful than you. There are also vampires, and there are also other monsters in that. Again, what did we talk about? What White Wolf does, werewolf, vampire, mage, changeling, wraith. So any of those things can kind of come about, and whether you're a vampire equipped to handle it is another story.
Well, yeah, but I feel like it's a bit different. Like a vampire definitely is a bit different. But this
vampire is way much more geared away from combat and more into that social aspect of the game, where it's almost like everyone's holding nukes and no one wants to shoot first. Right, that's how that game is presented. But werewolf is like everyone is a walking nuke and they don't care.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I got these nukes and I got an itchy trigger finger. Let's go.
Let's do this.
Mage is very similar to that, where it's kind of like that. I feel that mage is like the middle ground, where everyone is a nuke, but also fire the nuke has consequences for you as well as them. So it's like more of a give and take. And Wraith and Changeling are kind of like over in the corner doing their own thing, but you can pull them into
no one wants to play
they're into werewolf or vampire, but people can do whatever they want. But generally they were just so far removed, and they were kind of their own thing because they had their own special rules.
Right. Another thing I actually sort of like to take from a lot of indie games is sort of like their armor structure and how they sort of play out their armor. Like there was the one in Viking Death Squad where it's like you just have to whittle away at the armor. The same thing sort of like in Battle Stars. You have an armor points where, like I said, like in D&D and Pathfinder, it's like you have your armor. Like obviously there are certain monsters who can destroy shields or rust out weapons and stuff like that. But that's like a little more specialized. Whereas like it's just cool. Like all right, your armor is just completely destroyed, but you still have all your hit points because your armor took a lot of the life. Or like I said, or just like you can have different pieces of armor. Like in Viking Death Squad, it's like you can have like a coat that actually it has an armor value. Like everything kind of has an armor value that you wear, which is also kind of cool because that doesn't really exist in everything else. It's a little bit more straightforward. Also, again with the monsters, like some of what I like to do when I'm actually playing, like the more popular games, is I will give my monsters character classes. Like if they're like an intelligent enough society, like you know what? Here you go. I'm going to have all the melee ogres around you guys, and I'm going to have kobolds hiding in the tree as rogues, getting extra d6s for their sneak attack dice. That turns 5 kobolds into something that could really jack you up. Because then you can actually bring kobolds out against like 5th, 6th level guys. You can just have a whole bunch of them just sniping, while they're doing battle with, a hill giant and some ogres. You know what I mean? So it's like just, also, like I said, like with the indie games, I love like some of the cool weapon systems that they have. And again, it's like, one thing I really like is when we find a new game and we play it, and it's like we just really have a good time with it. Because, I mean, again, that's sort of the main goal of everything. Like all the first sentences in all the books is, this is for fun, have a good time, enjoy it, play it your way. Even when we play it wrong, we still play it fun.
Yeah.
And that's the goal, obviously. And I just find it really cool. Like there's just so many creative people out there that just like bring these games out. And a message to anybody out there, if you've made a game, send it to us. We will play it. And we will play it live if you want. Because we're welcome to play anything. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Hopefully somebody hears this and says, here, play our game.
I mean, here's the thing. Speaking of making your own games, in the process of making my own game, I have literally just been pulling from so many sources trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. I remember going through like 7 different iterations of this game, starting with like a multiplicative or additive D100 system that to rival like the like the Final Fantasy like max damage of 999, like because I love macro numbers like that. That is like that's so fun to me, just to be like, yeah, I did like 1,000 damage to this dude. Hell yeah, I had like 1,000,000,000 d6s for this. Like, it's stupid, but it was fun. But that was also like, if I ended up like putting this into code and then writing out like a few lines, I could actually do it was just easier on a computer, you know. Uh, so like looking at that and then like realizing, yeah, but that's not really gonna work, and then going to be like, oh, here's like a card game version of it. Like if I draw out little cards and then just like kind of paste them onto regular playing cards for now, you can use it as like loot pickup. Just random loot piles you pick up after fighting enemies, and then anything from like magic to armor, health, whatever it is, um, it all kind of coalesces. And now I'm working on just figuring out concepts. It's like, what do I want this game to accomplish versus how to accomplish it. So like one of the things that kind of stuck to me recently was my wife last year in school had a class where she learned about game therapy for a day. And I was like, that's actually pretty dope. Like if I could make something and it helps someone kind of get through something, that's pretty cool. And it kind of like reminded me of what I started with, which I said, like my first game ever, first tabletop role playing game was an indie game. This guy at college, I was in the guild at my school. So a whole bunch of nerds, and every Sunday we just got together and split off into groups to play TTRPGs. I got thrust into this group not knowing how to play. That's where I met Kim. And it's the guy's name is at PO Canless on Twitter. Really cool guy. He made this game called Knock, which he actually then transitioned into a comic, which is called Noob of Clandestine. Very fun game. Like I remember how to play this game so solidly because I played it for so long that I could run it at any time. Honestly, like I would love to showcase it to you guys too, because it's one of my fundamental pillars of indie RPGs, I should say. Make your own systems, home brews, everything. Homebrew isn't just a setting; it's also your own rules. Taking rules, kind of shifting them one to the left, seeing what happens. So, yeah, I'm totally down for just everything.
I think this is interesting that Zach, you brought up the topic of homebrew. Is homebrew indie RPG?
I think so. Like it's making something your own. I feel like APs are very structured and everything, but when you homebrew something, even if it's in a well-known system, you can change things around on a whim. How many times I've changed rules on Call of Cthulhu, or even just even the Kingdom Hearts thing I ran for the charity stream. It's like I changed a couple of rules because it was like, okay, well, this works a little bit better with what we're doing. It's I think in that regard, that does transform it into something more indie because it then takes on a body and life of its own that can further change out of it. So, like, say you're playing like a D20 system, and for like the first like 5 levels you're just playing Pathfinder or something, and then like you hit like a really like fantastical like boss like wipes the party, but you don't want to kill the entire party off, so you now switch to you guys are all dead and you're playing this other smaller game inside the game, and you're using your Pathfinder stats as like a compass in a way, and you're kind of just you can use anything to see what happens. Like you could use playing cards, you could use tarot cards, you could use dice, you could use a fucking soccer ball. How many times can you juggle the ball on your foot? Like a hacky sack, like jack. You start playing jacks on the table, pool. I don't know. Like you start playing quarters. I feel like homebrew lets you explore these crazier ideas of how to have fun at the table and tell a unique and compelling story.
I will say I disagree. Not that,
Damn you, Steve.
I'm sorry. I gotta play devil's advocate. It's not that I disagree with the idea of like we're playing game A and then something happens and then we shift to like a completely different rule set because narratively it's kind of interesting. It's more like, I think you can homebrew anything, and I think almost every RPG expects you to homebrew something. I mean, yes, when you're pulling into an AP that gives you, like, we're playing a Pathfinder AP, we're playing Wrath of the Righteous, we're playing Rise of the Rune Lords, we're playing Serpent Skull, whatever it is, we're playing Rise to Avernus, we're playing from level 1 to level 20. I don't know if Rise is from 1 to 20, but most Pathfinder APs is level 1 to level 20, right? Even built into those, there are clear gaps. Now, whether the game tells you there's clear gaps, they kind of built it in, and they kind of let the GM kind of, and I wish they would give a little bit more direction of like, here's a moment where you can kind of have fun and do your own thing. They don't do that as well as I would like, but most of them allow you space to, okay, well, I'm going to take books 1 through 4, and we're going to play through them straight. We're going to play them exactly like the books, but like between book 4 and book 5, there is like a 6-month gap. Have fun, throw something in there, do whatever. So I think that every game, even, and funny enough is, even if you're playing the game, it's okay, you brought your party from level 1 to level 20, you read it verbatim by the book. Well, then you have another group and they want to play the same thing. You're not going to run it the same way. You're definitely you're going to throw something in there. You're going to change this bad guy. You're going to add this little side adventure here in the time that you ran the first one, and to the time you ran the second one, you play this really cool one shot. You want us to stick it in somewhere and it kind of thematically fits, or you make it thematically fit. You cram it in there like you're putting 5-pound stuff in a 10-pound, 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. You make, and it's just like, I want to have this moment here. And whether it's in the book or not, I'm putting this moment here. And this is kind of like the ability of the GM to understand the flow of the game, to change anything in the game. So I think as most people would understand is like homebrew, is it's not written, it's coming from you. That's how I kind of perceive it. But yeah, I mean, if you want to just straight up change the rules and like have like a scenario that it literally is like, we're not playing Pathfinder, we're playing war. Or you want to fight the monster, we'll play war. Okay, great. I think that you don't have to be an indie title to do that. I think you could just kind of like, I was inspired to do this, and I kind of worked it out with a couple of friends of mine, and it works. You want to fight the fucking lich vampire dragon hybrid? We're playing war. Get a deck of cards out. Wow, war.
Right. Like when you run a lot of games, I usually homebrew everything. I don't like to buy adventure paths. Sometimes I find them either restricting or like people get way off script, because you also have to remember you're relying on the actions of every single player at your table. And the more players you have at your table, the more it's going to influence the way you can actually play, your store-bought adventure path. Because like everything can either just come off the rails right away, or, you also don't want to feel like you're railroading your players. Like, there's the dragon to the north, the east, and the south. Which way do you go? Like that sucks to have to do. You don't want to have to do that. But I've always sort of homebrewed. I mean, there was a game like me and my friend made up because it was like the middle of the night and we had just finished playing D&D and everybody else went home. I'm like, dude, let's just make something up. So like, all right, cool. Like we sort of like made this like mafiosa kind of game. And I was like running and like I was hiding in like those big restaurant sinks. The ones that you can't shoot through, and I'm just like hiding in there, and I'm popping out my little gun, and I'm trying to escape and stuff like that. He ran it, and I played. We used the dice that we had because we just finished playing D&D, and like that was like sort of like the first like we just sort of made a game. Like we played it a bunch of times, but it was literally just sort of me versus him, sort of in a way. But like I've always homebrewed, even when I've played sort of the big two. Plus, there's also a time where especially I ran a lot of second edition Dungeons and Dragons. And so when the Ravenloft set came out, I would buy the Ravenloft set. And literally, I just sort of homebrewed from like level 1 to 8. And then there was a module from level 8 to 12. So only a couple levels. And I was like, you know what? We're in Ravenloft. I'm going to run this module. And then sort of when they were done with that AP module, I went right back to homebrewing everything from, whoever survived, because we lost 2 people. But yeah, it happens.
Especially in second edition.
Yeah. Second edition is it's a rough slug sometimes, but
especially in Ravenloft.
Yeah, it's so different than the current Ravenloft, but that's a podcast for another day. I can't even get involved in that. I thought it was so much cooler back in the days.
Grass is always greener, man.
Yeah. Listen, but we always had a good time. We always homebrewed. Like a friend of mine, he went out, because he had money. Like the person with the money who was always the DM because they could buy the most stuff.
Mhm.
They could buy the most adventure paths. They could buy the most monster manuals. Because we used to run to the store every day waiting for the folio to come out. Because you didn't even come in books at the time. They used to send you loose leaf pages in bundles. You would buy like a 50-page set. You buy the Al-Qadim and the Karatur and the Ravenloft and the Greyhawk adventures, and like I would just throw them all into big binders. Like I would just take creatures from different worlds and put them wherever I wanted. I was like, oh, I'm going to use 2 Greyhawk monsters, and they're going to use 2 monsters from Forgotten Realms and 1 from Dragonlance. Because when you homebrew and you have all the stuff at your ready, you could pretty much do whatever you want with it. That's one thing I do miss about the older systems, though. I think, especially because they were out for so long, they give you a lot of content. Like 5th edition has also become, it was out for a while, so there was a lot of content. But like as far as like indie games go, it's like, it's just, again, like I just love seeing creative people put something out there and, say, hey, I'm going to take a chance with this. And it's just, I just enjoy playing games. Anytime somebody gives me something new to play, I'm like, yeah, man, let's play. So yeah, like I said, I welcome any indie games because it's also good to take a break from what you normally do. You know what I mean? So I don't know, I was always a fan of indie games. Like somebody coming, oh, I just bought this book, let's play this game, like let's go. Like that happened very often back in the days.
I don't know if I'm going to go off on a tangent here or if this is something we're already going to talk about later, that I'm going to steal Jared's thunder a little bit. But going off of the idea that like there's a lot of stuff that already exists in game systems, the trend of indie games right now, because obviously, look, we started off in D&D, and then D&D kind of spawned Pathfinder, and then we these rule sets, even Vampire, Shadowrun, a lot of those games from that era, from basically the 70s to the early 2000s, were these relatively complicated games. I mean, D&D didn't really start complicated, but it was kind of complicated, and it was a lot of charts because it was a war game, and then it kind of moved into this idea of what it is today. And then a lot of games built on that because this is how you iterate, right? And then what did indie games look at? They looked at the landscape and they said, man, all this stuff is super complicated. Let's go the completely other direction. Let's go super simple. So what's the benefit of that? Or the benefit of that is like, man, there's not a lot of stuff for indie card RPG. Right, it's just flat out. It's like there's not like 19 monster manuals for indie card RPG. There's not like 25 like settings for Viking Death Squad or Battle Sauce or any of these other indie games that we're talking about. But what we could do is like I can look through an old monster manual from D&D 1st or 2nd edition. Go, oh, this monster's really cool. What is this Demogorgon? Okay, I'm going to throw it in indie card RPG. What does the indie card RPG ask me to do? I need a target number. I need 8 moves. I need this. How much hit points does it have? Right? I could literally boil down a block of rules that I needed in that whatever system it came from and boil that down to the core mechanic that I want the feel of this monster to be. And then maybe I just use the artwork and everything's different. Or maybe I take everything from it, but I just boil it down to like 8 moves.
Right. Yeah,
so it makes it really easy to... Yeah, take different things. Oh man, well I'm going to take the Demogorgon from old D&D, and I'm going to take this weird thing from Pathfinder. I'm going to take this other thing from Cthulhu, and then you can have this like crazy game, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to get you there.
Right. Just to sort of touch on like the simplicity, that's sort of what makes it work. You know what I mean? Like, like you want something that people can pick up and learn how to play easily and teach 5 friends. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you just can't say, oh, I just bought this thing. It's called Dungeons and Dragons. Let me read this book. You spend like 3 days reading. You're like, oh my God, what is all this? There's like 65,000 charts. And, listen, like once you get to the play, it's great. But sometimes it would take some time. Whereas like, a lot of these indie creators, they're just like, here it is. Boom. 1 sheet of rules and you're done. Or like a little booklet of rules, maybe 16 pages stapled together. Here you go. That's the rules. That's everything. That's how you make this. That's how you make that. Like the simplicity is really kind of what sells it. Because it's like, like, hey, Zach, I just bought this thing yesterday. I'm going to send it to you today. We'll both read it by tomorrow. And we're playing by, 3 days from now.
Yeah.
And we're showing 5 other people how to play because it's super easy. That's sort of what, really, really helps the indie creator is that like, simple system, simple rules. Here it is. You don't have to buy, 6, 250-page books to learn how to play my game and to play it successfully and to sort of do whatever you want. Plus, they also, if you notice, they allow you the freedom to, like I said, as Steve was saying, to bring other things into the game where it's not just all laid out for you. Because sometimes you just lay it out, it's like, all right, that's cool and all, but like, what if I wanted to do this? Like, there's a lot more freedom within the rules that they present to you, and there's a lot more freedom in the gameplay as they present it to you.
Yeah, I mean, what is that Pirates of the Caribbean quote of they're more like guidelines? It's like that's kind of how I view it too, because like I've played Knock where it's kind of really just make it up as you go along. Even your character stuff is all made up. Nothing is written down. Like you come up with powers and stuff as you gain levels, and you talk it over with your friends and who's ever running it. Like, hey, I had a character that was a boxer. And literally every time that he would just store firepower in his fucking fist, and so every time he hit on like a certain number, that exploded in on top of the exploding tens. So he would double explode, and so it was just going and going, like just hammering into this guy. And it was all just fire damage at that point because it was just moving so fast with just heat. Versus like the Kingdom Hearts RPG Interstitial, where those guidelines were like they gave you rules on how to cast magic, but there weren't any spells really given to you in any of the character classes. It was like the only spell they really talked about was heal, but that was also just an innate thing that some classes had. You didn't have to roll to cast magic. If you wanted to be able to if you wanted to cast magic at any time, all you have to do is be like, "Hey, I'm going to try to cast a spell because why the hell not?" It's like magic. Woo! So it's, but then you have my game where I kind of drew a lot from like the tree, like the ability trees of like Dragon Age, where you kind of like pick one ability and it kind of branches off into a couple more, or you can just follow it straight down. You can get like the evolving like backswing, cleave, whirlwind attack, all that kind of stuff. But like I do think it is more of a guideline system, the simplicity. Like I said, I use it more for role playing, like furthering my own role playing and like finding a purpose to do something with the game itself. So, Jared, been quiet for a while. Do you have anything to add to this?
Oh, you guys are doing fine. I think that we resolved the fact that homebrewing is not indie tabletop role playing games, but homebrewing leads to tabletop role playing games. So homebrew is as we all learned in the 90s, it's the marijuana, it's the gateway drug to tabletop role playing games. With that being said, I think a lot of you bring up a lot of good points on how I think indie games are focused or honed things people like. So like Zach said, like, hey, I really like Dragon Age. I like the skill tree system. Same thing from Final Fantasy, right? Like Final Fantasy did that. Japanese role playing games focused heavily on stuff like that.
RPGs.
Yeah, you got a skill tree system, and then same thing. What I said earlier, where I was like, hey, I see a lot of indie games are focused on changing how monsters work, and I'm a fan of that. And Jeff was like, hey, listen, I usually just take stuff I like and just jam it in there. And similar to what Steve built on was like, stuff like that where you guys build and then basically what I'm hearing is the NVNG indie tabletop game is coming soon. Sign up to Patreon. No, like that's but that's what we were all talking about, right? Like Zach is like, hey, I really like talent trees. It makes it easier and it stops people from having the choice panic, right? Like that's sometimes things that we can see. 5th edition kind of, I feel, went a little overboard with that, with the choice panic. They're like, listen, you get apples or oranges, and that's really your choice, But then coming from 3.5, or even 3rd edition, where it was like, hey, you're level 2. Here's a sub book on fighters and figure it out. Like, good luck. Level up in about 15 minutes. I'm going to go for a smoke break. And the people who were like, whoa, that's too much, probably led to a few homebrew games and indie games, that evolved out of that.
4th edition did that too.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But that's
and when things like that happen, indie creators come out and say, hey, you know what? I'm not happy with this. Either I'm going to go back to playing 3rd edition with my friends, or you know what? Let's just come up with something. Let's just powwow, have a power lunch, and just hash out some ideas that we want to do. We're just going to make our own game.
Yeah.
I want to know when Fate came out, if it was actually influenced by 4th edition's release.
Published 2003. So yeah, it was around 4th edition.
No, so from 2007 through 2013 it was 4th edition. So Fate was a little early.
Yeah.
To the punchline, but still, I mean, look, if you look at the timeline, I bet you 4th edition spawned a whole bunch of companies. Whether those companies are still in existence to this day, I have no idea. But I bet you that there were games that came about because 4th edition made the decision 4th edition is, and hence the current meta of whatever game we're talking about. It could be Pathfinder 1st edition, it could be Pathfinder 2nd edition, it could be 5th edition. I mean, there's the indie games now coming out because 5th edition is a thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always going to be indie's going to buck a trend a little bit because they're going to find a space that nobody's doing something in, and they're going to go, that's my spot. I'm going to take it. And then they're going to find like-minded people and they're going to play it, or it's going to not do well. It is what it is.
Yeah. I will say in 2007, Fate won Best Rules by Ennies, right? So the Ennies system.
And that's indie games, right?
Yeah, that's mostly indie games. Not 2008 nominated for Best Supplement. So 2007 it won Best Rules.
And
so
2007 is when 4th edition came out.
Before the edition came out.
And dived right into the indie
coincidence?
Scene.
Who knows?
Who knows, right? But I feel like the conversation here is, is it it's obviously a net positive for a bigger system to fail to allow for a newer system to thrive, or to kind of drive people to create. Because suddenly, I no longer enjoy what is being done, so I'm going to homebrew, right? So if you look on Drive-Thru-RPG or D&D Beyond, tons of homebrew. But like Steve keeps saying, probably from there, more homebrew. That homebrew, as we unpacked earlier, homebrew then becomes indie. So I think because of the resurgence of the tabletop role-playing scene, you now had that push for indie games. That's why we now have Die, right? Like the Die system. We have Labyrinth turned into a tabletop role-playing game. We have, Dark Crystal turned into a tabletop role-playing game. Battle
Sauce.
Battle Sauce, that was cool. Battle Sauce, all the ones, Fantasy Age, which didn't come out, which is not really indie.
That's the thing. Is it indie? I don't think so.
I think it is.
It probably was at one point.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I think TV show.
I think that's about as indie as like Zweihander is for Germany.
Because didn't what was it? Fantasy Age. Didn't Fantasy Age come out and they were supposed to be making it for a specific show or something like that coming out, but then there's something happened with the licensing and they said, no, we're not doing it. So they said, well, we already did the work, so here you go. So the question is it really indie, or is it just like a happenstance? That's really what
a happy accident.
The same thing is I'm gonna reference this to a board game. The game Quarriors, which is a kind of a fun kind of dice rolling, dice building game, came about because the company that was making Quarriors actually was first slated to make Dice Masters for Marvel. And something happened with the license and it kind of fell through. I'm like, well, we already designed the dice. We have the dice. We have the rules. We have everything done. Let's make this a board game. Bam. Now we have Quarriors. And they came up with a bunch of different expansions and everything like that. And then what happened? They eventually made, with another company, they made Dice Masters, maybe with the same company. I'm not sure. But Dice Masters still became a thing. But because that they had already this work done but the licensing fell through, they still released it. But is that an indie? Not. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is it not? can something be indie and still be mainstream? That I think that inherently kind of defeats the purpose of it.
The floodgates are going to open very soon. But I also feel like, in the sense for indie RPGs, Drive Through RPG, the website, is like a one-stop shop to find all these indie games that range from one-page RPGs to like a 3-book series on this one game. And the creator was just like, here you go, world. Like, I feel like that is also such a popular website for a lot of gamers to actually find these games and be like, oh, this one speaks to me, or like this one serves a purpose for what I'm doing right now. There's a game that's literally just stacking dice. And
Yes, I saw that.
Oh yeah,
it is
oh, yeah.
I
such
saw
a
that
fun
one.
game. It is such a fun game, not gonna lie. But it's just like, what the hell is this? How is it? But the system behind it is like thought provoking and everything. It's like how to play is like, it's not just about stacking dice. It's about stacking dice and emotion, you know, and also forgetting all your emotions, you know. So I think you're really gonna find anything, but that is also going to bring it. Again, what Steve was saying, popularity is where the population is almost, you know,
Mhm.
like all the people that really are looking for them are gonna find them, and they're gonna play them, and they're gonna be popular. They're gonna have it kind of move from one place to the next because people are gonna talk about it, and it's still gonna be indie because technically it's smaller than everything else. You know, I would even say even these like smaller uh these smaller companies, like even if they are companies that build machines of games, like they
Mhm.
just they make these systems and games.
Yeah.
I still think they are, if they are smaller and not as many people play them, I still think you can classify it as indie. You know, yeah, everyone is coming into TTRPGs right now, and I feel like the conversation is either Pathfinder or D&D. Like I granted, you have some people every once in a while. I hear a Starfinder or a Star Wars the RPG. Like I
Oh
like
yeah.
or Star Wars the RPG and Star Trek RPG. Like those competing heads, but it's also like those are nemesis from
Yeah,
ages
huge
gone by. You know?
franchises. Well,
Yeah,
there's a lot of money with those names associated
yeah.
with those names.
I will send the thing to Jared here because of the fact that the Games Workshop is much more popular in England, where the company originated.
Mhm.
Is the role-playing game Dark Heresy indie for the United States?
Warhammer? Are you
Yeah,
arguing Warhammer?
Warhammer's indie in the
Oh,
United States because it's much more
all right.
popular over there, and it's not
Uh-huh.
that. I mean, most people don't know that Warhammer has a role playing game here. I
Yeah,
bet
well,
you, if you
yes, I mean-
grab even if you're grabbing like even if you're like surveying role playing people, I bet you a lot of them don't even know it exists.
So it's interesting. Do I think is it indie? I want to say the role playing aspect of it. If you went to many people, I want to say a lot of people might be like, "Well, I didn't know about that. They had a tabletop game to it." I think that might be, yes, more people would be less likely to know that, but I can't say Warhammer is indie because it's fucking Warhammer.
Yeah,
Like it's
Warhammer,
Warhammer.
but yeah,
it is
that's kind of like what I
Warhammer.
was.
There are how many
I understand
books to
your
that?
point.
Yeah,
There are how many books to that game?
I want to say probably the role play would be niche and not as known. So yes, that would be considered the indie aspect of Warhammer. But Warhammer is a tank unto itself, right? Like
Yeah.
that's
Well,
like yeah.
Well, I mean, we're
and-
also really trying to discuss like just lesser known, lesser played, just tiny companies. All of that sort of encompasses what we're sort of trying to define as indie, and that that makes sense to like the general populace as how they might view indie. Of course, like hardcore indie people are like, well, that's not indie. This is, and that's not. This, and that's fine. That's their opinion because they're more entombed in it. Whereas we're just like, hey, you know what? Here's a game nobody's ever heard of. So to me, that's indie. Like like I said, when there was no internet, we didn't know where to find games. We used to go to the stores, the game stores, and like every once in a while we would pick up our regular D&D stuff, and it would be like, hey, you know what? There's a couple things over here. Let's let's buy one and see what we could do with it. So you would just pick a random game off the shelf and you would try to play it. So that's kind of how like we found, like there was no like your circle of friends was small. You played with anyone in the neighborhood who played. That was how we played D&D. Like you found 5 or 6 kids in the neighborhood who said, hey, we all play D&D. So guess what? We're all friends now because we're all playing D&D. And that's how it went. Like there wasn't no, going online and say, hey, looking for a game. I live in this area. Like that was not a thing. And as people would get jobs, we'd be like, my friend's like, oh, some guy at my job plays. So like now we're going to go to his house and play with some of his friends. Like that's pretty much how it went. It was all word of mouth. And of course, like I said, everybody would go and like we would stop at the store and be like, hey, you know what? Here's a cool looking game. Let's pick it up and we'll learn how to play it. And that's kind of how like we would sort of find our indie games. Like whenever we had an extra $20, we'd be like, hey, we got 20, $25. Let's pick up this box and see what we got. Let's get these 2 books and see what we got.
Yeah. Ironically, Call of Cthulhu, one of a very popular system, would be considered indie in my mind because it's niche, and not many people play it. I think the amount of
it's ebbed and flowed over the years in popularity.
I love it.
It's kind of taken a dip in recent years because they haven't had an update to the system in a while. I think the last update was like
a few years ago,
early teens.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I time no longer means anything to me. I've cocooned and I've evolved past time and understanding. Only because of having a kid and having a pandemic and starting a podcast company and then having a second kid. Time no longer means anything. It's just the rise and flow of the sun.
Yep. You didn't learn after the first one.
Yeah.
You didn't learn.
Legitimately, people are like, hey, on Monday, blah, blah, blah. I was like, when was Monday? They were like 3 days ago. I was like, oh, okay. It's been 3 moons.
You mean
since
the Monday we just experienced in our time?
Yeah, I don't have concepts of days and weeks.
He's turning into Dr. Manhattan, where he feels all the simultaneous.
That's literally how I feel currently.
So I just turn blue, naked, and get a third eye. And then you're good.
I'm just
travel to tomorrow and find out what the lottery numbers were.
Yeah, right.
Travel back.
I'm just in one of those like life rafts floating in the ocean of time.
That's it.
We're gonna see him strung out tomorrow on the lawn, airbrushed blue.
Just walking around Manhattan.
That's it.
So the next point I wanted to bring up was how do you feel about indie RPGs in the concept of so a lot of the indie RPGs I see are made for like short-term games and not focused on long-term campaigns. I.e., so like I said, going back to the one I really like, which is Viking Death Squad, right? If you read it, it's more or less made for like multiple like just short-term campaigns because there are no levels in that game. It's just you kind of get better whenever the GM, so it's milestone system conceptually, and similar with Battle Source, it's a little bit of levels, but it's not. So I feel like a lot of indie games kind of shy away. Even Vampire, right? Like let's rope in a big one. Vampire has no levels. You just get XP more or less, and then your vampire becomes more vampire-y to a point. But I feel like do levels matter? And if you were looking at an indie RPG, is that something like that would bring you in, or would that exclude you? And also, are indie RPGs more one shots, or maybe 2 shots, and then you play one of the big 2, that we talked about?
Well, actually, I think that's sort of one of the better parts of the lore of the game is that, like, I don't have to play this for 3 years. Whereas there may be games you're like, oh my God, I wish we can campaign that. And you know what? You can. You bought the stuff. Use your brain. Campaign it if you want. Like, that's sort of like, it's open there. Like I said, there may not be sort of like rules of how you do such things, but if you really want to campaign something, you kind of can. I mean, maybe not every single game, but there are games that you could probably campaign for at least a decent amount of time if you really, really like to. Like, I think Battle Source you could, because even there they sort of like I go up to like sort of 5 levels, and then you can just expand on those 5 and just sort of go a little bit higher, and sort of you can just regulate it however you really kind of like. But again, that's also part of the draw of it, is that like, hey, I can learn this fast and I can play this fast, rather than like, okay, we're going to start a D&D campaign. Guess what? You know what I mean? Like, because I'm the kind of guy, I want to play to level 20. Like, I don't want to stop. I want to retire characters. That is my main goal. Anytime I play any game that involves leveling up and getting to a certain point. Like, I have so many retired characters from 2nd edition, but I also have a stack of character sheets, maybe about 3 to 4 inches thick, of ones between like 2nd and 14th level. Like, we just either the game just broke up, or somebody broke up with their girlfriend, so now we can't play anymore, or something would always happen to sort of stop it. But as far as like the indie scene, I think that's really kind of part of the lore of it, and sort of this, again, with the simplicity of it, that makes it very relatable, very quickly, very easy to learn. And like I said, like especially like if you're players like we are, because we like to play everything, we're going to have fun with it because of who we are playing the game, as well as what the game presents for us to sort of have fun with. Like when you have a good group, you could play anything and just really, really have a great time. Even a shitty system, we could still, have fun with it. And again, I really think that's sort of like part of the whole lore of the indie game, is that like I could pick this up, I could learn it fast, we could play it fast. If we like it, guess what? We can play it again. Or we can play with a different group of people, or we could change the settings, or stuff like that. Because a lot of it leaves you very open to your own rules, your own settings, sort of your own, technology levels. Like all of those things exist in these games. Whereas, like some of the other ones are a lot more detailed out, of course, because when you have 30 books, you're going to have a lot of detail. Whereas if you have like, again, a 20-page booklet with the instructions on how to play, make characters and your monsters, it just leaves more for you to interpret and sort of present to your players. And also for the players, it's easy system to learn. And, like I said, again, to me, it's always the people and not always the game. It's like when you go to like, why are we going to that bar? Like, I don't want to go to that bar. That bar sucks. But if I'm going with 5 of my friends that we're going to like have a really, really good time at, no matter what, then you know what? We go. Because like I said, I'm enjoying the people. I don't care what the place is. The place is just there to take my money and serve me drinks, and maybe bring me some food, hopefully, if they have some food. You know what I mean? But I'm there to enjoy time with my friends. And I think that's sort of like what sort of the indie game gives you. It's like, here's the bar. It doesn't have to be the greatest thing in the world. But you know what? I'm bringing these 4 people with me. We're going to, figure out how this game works and really enjoy playing it. Like you see us when we play these games. When we play Battleswords, we go frickin' bananas. Like Viking Death Squad, I could have played that for like 6 more hours that night.
We went bananas with Retail Cannibals, and that was one page
RPG.
And that was just Tina.
Yup. Tina did an awesome job on that, by the way. I'm assuming Tina will listen to this at some point. Tina did awesome. I really enjoyed playing that.
Yeah, but honestly, piggybacking off of Jeff's completely right. I feel like these indie games, especially like the ones I gravitate to, which are for like they have world building games, or like character a mano character games, so that you can use to kind of flesh out your character, which I find is good if you're setting up to play a larger campaign in a different system, whether that's a D20 system, D100, or even like there's like a spooky Western RPG that I can't even remember right now off the top of my head, but it's like you can always build into the other games, or just do standalone stories, which is in their own right fun if you have your own like world and you just want to build on it. Like, here's this hero of myth and legend. How did he get there? Well, now we're gonna find out at the table by playing this game. Like I find like these indie games add to whatever game you're playing. Doesn't matter what it is going to add to it with new rules, new ways of thinking, because there's a lot more adjective and storytelling kind of flair, but also just map making. Like, here's how we build a town, a society, a kingdom, and everything that they dislike, what they like, how they flourish, and then also how they crumbled into dust.
Yeah, so I was actually going to kind of piggyback on kind of both those ideas. First thing that when people making RPGs is it goes, what are we missing, right? But we also know that there are the behemoths, right? There's the White Wolf games, so the vampires and the werewolves, and then we have the D&Ds, and then we have the Pathfinders, and we have these giant systems. And sometimes I go, well, here's my gap. Here's the gap that nobody's doing this. So they make this game. And that maybe the game is geared more towards like these little individual one-shots. Maybe like you're stringing together like 2 or 3 episodes, right? 2 or 3 sessions so you can advance a little bit. But maybe the system isn't really geared for like maxing out your character because at that point, you know, you can trivialize everything or everything scales to your level anyway. So it, you know, at the beginning, at the end, does it really make that much of a difference? But then other games, then people are going to find those systems. They go, man, I've been looking for a system like this. I've been playing D&D or I've been playing Pathfinder for years and years and years. And my one complaint is X. And I found Index Card RPG, or I found Battle Stars, or I found Viking Death Squad, and that's my game. And those people are going to make that their game. So they're going to play that game, whatever that game is. Just like people play 1 to 20 in Pathfinder, less like people play 1 to 20 or 1 to 10 in the 5th edition, or they play however they gets tracked for a vampire. Like, oh, I've played a 3,000-year-old vampire, and we played for 3 years and for the same character. People are going to gravitate towards these systems, but they also understand their place in the market. So a lot of people may use it as like a filler game where like we need a break, or we only have like half the party members because, you know, vacations happen or whatever. And we use it to kind of fill a gap in our game, or we just finished a campaign and we just need a break. We need to turn our brains off and just have like ridiculous, stupid fun and maybe go crazy that we wouldn't go through with a character that we just spent 3 years leveling to level 20, right? We wouldn't go like, you know, batshit insane with that character because I spent 3 years playing that character. I don't want to just like throw him into a wall. You know, I don't want to shoot that character out of a cannon, right? But like, hey, if we're only playing 2 sessions, shoot my ass out of that cannon, man. I gotta get in there. So even like, what was that game? There was like, what was it, 13 candles or 7 candles, whatever that game is designed. You die at the end. Like everyone dies.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many games like that.
Yeah, that's an indie game.
I want to play that game so badly.
I haven't played it. I've just heard about it, and I heard good
like
things.
Like every good kung fu movie, like everybody dies at the end. There's nobody left alive.
Yeah,
it's such a good.
Like even the hero dies from too many wounds fighting the bad guy.
Yeah, you go out in a blaze of glory. So the idea that you have to have the like indie games have to have like a 1 to 20 mechanic or have to have levels. Like, look, I will say most indie games, even if they're like one of these ones where like either it's hyper narrative and it like it is like 13 candles where like literally it ends, or there was another one that I can't remember where it's like almost like it's a horror movie where like either you escape and the game ends, or you all die and the game ends. So there's no like continuing the story. Like you're all like regular people and the werewolf is hunting you, right? And you can't fight it, right? You don't have silver. Yeah. So there's games like that, but there's also games like that give you the pathway to progression, but they may not give you all the progression. At some point, you're gonna have to like fill in. Like, okay, well, Viking Death Squad, I've got the best weapon, or I got the best armor. What do I do next? Well, either you decide to start again and make new characters, you go back to your regular game that you were playing before, or you develop, yet again, going back to the homebrew idea, and you'd make more.
Because indie games are such fun, interesting ideas, right? Like these are we live in the age where anything could be printed because everyone has a platform, which is amazing, right? I'm sure you could, if you dive deep enough in the internet, you will find some horrific games. But you know, that happens with everything. But I think the idea of having the indie game can be a palate cleanser that you can always go back to. Because remember, we said this, many indie games have easy rules to follow. Even like detailed games, usually because they are indie, quote unquote indie, have very simple rules to go back to. Look at Fantasy Age, was the 3 dice system where if you get 2 and you get that chart where you could do cool shit, right? Mm-hmm. We could always go back to that because it was a similar model to the conceptually it's a fantasy game, right? Like, oh, I have this many spells and I could do this with spells, and I have a pole arm and an axe and such. We could always go back to that because we have a baseline understanding of a tabletop game. We could always go back to Borderlands and play Borderlands, even though there were weird rules in Borderlands. We were like, how does this work? Characters were blowing up into the loot, and I was making the bad guy do crazy bad guy stuff. We could always go back to that. There are levels in that game, but we could always go back to that because we have a baseline understanding, and the rules were so simple. I think the hardest part of that game was the generation of magic, of quote unquote magical or weapons, right? Mm-hmm. But because it was so simple, it was just easy to jump into. Battlestar, same effect, right? Like you just jump back into it. You're like, oh, okay, this is how easy. I think a lot of people get mad when the term easy is used for a tabletop game, but easy isn't synonymous with bad. Easy or boring. Easy isn't synonymous with boring or bad. I think easy is the best, like a badge of honor for any indie creator.
Oh yeah, that's less thinking on my part. Like the less I'm an idiot. The less thinking I gotta do to understand something. Bravo! Thank you for doing all the hard work for me.
Right? Yeah, because again, it kind of goes back to that. Like. We want people to get this. Like if people pick it up and they read like the first 3 pages and they're just lost, they're going to put it back on the shelf. You know what I mean? They're going to be like, I can't get into all of this. Again, it actually, like I said, like we were saying, like easy is not a bad term. It is actually a very good term when it comes to indie games and smaller companies and smaller games, because it just makes it more accessible, and also, like I said, it's palatable. Like you can. Like, all right, you know what? This is super easy. I can have all my friends playing this within a day. Rather than like, all right, I got to send this PDF to all of my friends. I was like, dude, read this over the next month and maybe we could play a game like in a few weeks. Like, that's not really what you want, because people are going to be like, oh, do I really have to do this? I have to work all day. Then I have to come home and deal with this and that and this and that. I don't have time to sit here and read all this stuff. So sort of, like we're saying, like easy doesn't, we're not using that in a bad way at all. Actually, we're using it in a very good way. Like, it's like, here you go, run with it. And it just also makes, as I said, it's more accessible to a lot more people, especially people who are not as heavy into gaming as we may be. Like maybe somebody who's at a store, oh, I want to get something for my kid to learn, oh, he's 12 and he's like really kind of into this and that. You'd be like, you know what, here, try this. Like something he can, literally read in like a night and be like, hey, let's play this. I learned how to play this last night. I'll show you all how to play right now. I mean, that's what you want, especially, you want your stuff to move off the shelves. Especially like, like I said, like we've actually had the pleasure of playing some really, really good indie games. So it's like, yeah, like don't take easy as bad. Easy is great in this regard.
Especially if it's used as like a palate cleanser, like we were talking about before. Like we're playing, like even though D&D is probably the simplest it's ever been, it's still, I wouldn't say a simple game. No. There is lots going on, a lot of things going on in that game that obviously from our perspective, like we've done it before. We've played the first editions and the second editions and the third editions and all the editions, right? And we go, okay, well, 5th edition, oh my God, thank God, it's so easy. Well, it's so easy from our perspective because we played the complicated. But now it's like from a person who's never played any RPG before, they look at 5th edition, that's like what, 200-300 page book, and like, oh my God, I don't know if I could do this. And then you look at like I said, the 1-page RPG. You're like, oh, we're bears. We got to steal stuff. Sure, got it. So then that dichotomy there, where it's just like, okay, well, I understand this game. You got me into 5th edition. You got me into Pathfinder. Okay, well, I can get it, but this is about the level of like complexity that I can handle. Because I'm not really into as many games as the next person, right? The next person is super into games; they get it. I'm not that much into games. This is pushing my limit. Okay, we played this for 6 months. We know that you just hit a big level and you get more spells. We don't know what to do. Hold on, we're gonna take like 3 or 4 sessions off. We're gonna play this crazy game over here. Just do what you want.
I agree. So I think easy is the key to the indie concept. Maybe that is the kernel of truth that this all turns out to be. What makes something indie? The ease of getting into it, and how obviously things can be indie. Like for me, Dragonbane. We just played it. Go to our YouTube and watch us play it.
That was so much fun.
That was super fun. It was a roll under system, and Zach was killing it because Zach is a terrible dice roller.
It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
Zach rolled 2 ones and was like, "I am the Superman," and it was awesome, right? But for us, that's indie, right? Because it's Dragonbane, which is which is Swedish, and it's huge in Sweden and in those areas. But over here in the US, it's just finally getting converted and going to come here. I think it's going to be a popular system because A, you could be a duck person, which I'm super excited for, and B, it's for me, it looks fun, right? Like it has a lot of interesting mechanics that aren't hard to grasp. Like the wizard could burn life to get more spells, Steve.
Yes.
Which he did do in the final battle.
I almost died.
Burning lives. Yeah, he was like, I'm just gonna burn my life to do that.
That's the fun part.
Yeah. And again, back to the ease of a system, and it's a very simple system from the play test that we got to play. Very simple system to understand. Simple, not bad or not boring. Simple. So I think that for me, maybe that's the kernel of truth we've gotten to. The how fun and how fast a person can get into a system is what makes it indie. Because if I have to sit down with the Bible, it is probably an indie game because no one's going to sit down with that. Like, can I get a moment? I'm going to just give me a moment so I can show you this ginormous fucking book. This is what I mean about sometimes you should just go simple.
Damn.
Oh, I would love to play a game like that. Yes. Yes, more of that.
That is
a
thick.
freaking textbook from.
It was
high
holding
school.
up a part of a table
That's
because I needed. Yeah, I'll tell you how many pages it
That's
is.
my AP
Well, just because it's got a lot of
bio
pages. Just because of a lot of pages doesn't necessarily mean that
No.
every person who's playing it needs every page. And
No.
that's
Half the
another
book could
thing.
be spells.
Yeah.
It's not, but that's a nice. Yeah, like in the back, like it's beautiful, right? Like so, it's old school beautiful, right? Like beautiful,
Nice.
right?
That's very nice.
But this thing is huge.
I bet you there's a market for that. I bet you people bought that and were like, "This is my jam. This is like the best
greatest
thing since
game
sliced
ever."
bread."
Yeah.
Well, who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe he's trying to become a big and said, "You know what? I'm going to go big." He's like, "I want to be the third. I want to be the third party."
Yeah.
I mean,
This is the third party. It's the whole
not
third
gonna
party.
lie. Not gonna lie. The more and more I work on my game, it is literally turning into a very large PDF.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
So I'm doing my best to try and condense it.
And here's my hot take on the idea we were talking about, where indie equals simple for the most part, like the 90-20, like the 80-20 rule. Okay, so we see the trend where like Pathfinder and D&D, even 5th editions, like a little less complicated, but it's still relatively complicated in the grand scheme of things. Versus a lot of these indies are very rules light, right?
Yeah.
And they're very narrative focused and rules light. Okay, so then you see a game like that, right? I will say that indie will generally buck the trend. I will say that my ultimate definition of indie is generally smaller companies, and they will almost always buck a trend. They will almost always find the thing that nobody's doing and then say, that's the game I want to make. Right? So what is happening a lot? We're doing these very rules light, very hyper narrative focused games. Like D&D 5th edition is probably the pinnacle example of that. Even though it has a load of rules, they went more narrative and less rules.
Yeah.
So what is indie going to do? If that's the bucking trend, if that's the trend currently, is that less rules, more narration, and then what is indie going to do? If that's what everyone's doing, then there's going to be people that are going to be like, man, I would love to have a more crunchy system, and it just doesn't exist. There, indie comes in. So I think indie, like the concept of indie, is going to constantly change based on what the current trend is. But right now, it was like very much rules, whole bunch of narrative indies. The mainstream went indie, the mainstream went narrative, and you're going to start slowly seeing, I think, in my opinion, which means virtually nothing, but you're going to slowly see that it's just going to be like more and more complicated rules because there's going to be people who are looking for that. And it's just going to be this kind of like yin-yang type of thing.
I feel I have to agree with Steve. Steve kind of got to the kernel of like what indie is. It only took us about an hour and a half to get to it. And that is maybe indie is just bucking the current trend. So if everything is narrative, the indie will be crunchy. And when everything is crunchy, the indie will be narrative. I would like to hear from the rest of you on kind of like closing statements. So why don't we throw it over to Jeff? So Jeff, what are your closing statements on this topic?
Hi, well, I mean, sort of over the course of years, all the indie games I've played, I would probably say I liked about 90 to 95% of them. But that's also me. Like, I enjoy, like, oh, there's a new game. It's super fast and easy to learn. Let's try it. You know, I've always kind of been that way with games. I think they're obviously clearly a necessary part of the TTRPG world. Like I said, it gives you like, a break from your everyday game. It also, like you said, it provides you with new things and also sort of new ways of viewing your characters when you're playing the bigger kind of games. Like you'd be like, oh, like, you know what? I would love to build a character sort of like this and bring it into my D&D or Pathfinder game. Like I said, it really just provides you with new outlooks, new information, new ways of having fun. And just in general, support your indie gamers. And like I said, any indie gamers out there who have something and they want somebody to play it on a podcast, we will gladly play your game. Send it to us, man. Look us up. I'm sure we will attach a run of our socials at some point on this. But I love indie games. I love indie creators. Those are necessary people in the RPG world. And happy gaming, everybody. Play stuff.
Zach, what closing statements to you?
My closing statement. I was gonna say I dig indie RPGs more than anything. I like the weird. I like the off the beaten path. I would also like to seed some plugs, if that's okay. So, like I said before, check out my friend P.O. Canlas at P.O. Canlas on Twitter. Monday Destroy. He's the one who created New Book Clandestine, which is right now a comic book. Really good, awesome guy, very funny. A couple other indie games, I guess, or just games that aren't really around. Like I played at the charity stream, Interstitial, Our Hearts Intertwined by Riley Hopkins of Linksmith Games. Very fun. It's based on Kingdom Hearts. Amazing. And then what you might see from us in the next few months is Vysen from Free League Publishing, which is like a Nordic horror role-playing game. Very cool. I have both books thanks to Jared. It is so awesome. It is supernatural. It is supernatural the RPG, but a little bit better in my opinion. But that's it. So have some fun with those games. Those are a couple of Zach's recommendations. Maybe we'll play a knock game for Patreon. It's a lot of fun.
I think we got on a couple of, a multitude of interesting points on what makes indie, why indie does the way indie does, the benefits of kind of having an indie as just like a one-shot machine to give you a break from your main game, maybe even to make it your main system that you're operating out of. It gives you, it generally gives you a lot more freedom to experiment and just to have fun and homebrew. But and also to the point where you can even play something that like, oh, there's a genre of like you said, supernatural. I want to play a game that's supernatural. There's a game there for that. I want to play super crazy cyberpunk Viking immortal gods. There's a game for that. You pick a topic. There's probably someone who made a game that if it's not exactly what you're looking for, it's close enough. But I don't know. I don't know what keeps happening here. This thing keeps getting in my way. I don't know.
Steve just really wants to play Transformers.
Man,
we'll play
we got the touch.
we have the power to play whatever the hell we want to play. All right?
Yeah.
But it's just all joking aside. Whether you like indie, whether you like mainstream, it doesn't matter as long as you're having fun.
And I think that's a great statement to end on. If you're playing, whether you're playing indie or mainstream, as long as you're having fun. So hopefully you had fun hanging out with us here at Nothing Venture, Nothing Game. This is Healing Pots, brought to you by Us Fools. It's going to be a once a month.
And not sponsored by the Walking Dead alcohol, but
Yeah,
I've
spirits
been
of
drinking
alcohol.
it this whole night.
Yeah.
The letter W.
Don't forget to check out nvngpodcast.com. That's our website. All our information is there. All of our socials are there. You can get some episodes on there.
So from all of us here, I want to say thank you very much for listening and have a wonderful day. And rock on with your gaming. Yeah.
Woo!
Rock on with your bad self.
We got
Later.
the touch.
We got the power.
Gotta keep that in at the end.